Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's DevOps.com webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, kind of a moderator for this event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great event on tap. The folks from Plutora always do a great job. But before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for any of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate. Just use the question and answer tab here on your interface and submit your questions, and we'll try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. We also have a very interactive chat feature, so we encourage you to chat us up. You just send us suggestions, questions, comments, whatever you got for us. Just send it on over. We'll take a look at it, and maybe we'll even chat you back. And then we do have polling questions, 2 of them during the course of the webinar, so hopefully we can get everybody engaged with those. And then finally, at the end of today's webinar, we are going to be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you will be one of our 4 lucky winners. I also want to let you know we do have a handout in the handout section, and I think there may be some other things coming your way during the webinar as well. So with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is Realize the Promise of Value Stream Management with Plutora. Our speakers today are Jeffrey Keyes, who is the VP of Product, and I believe you actually have an expanded title now, maybe, but you're going to be acting as the MC for today's event. So so Jeff's here, and then Bob Davis, who is the Chief Marketing Officer at Plutora, and Ben Wonson, who is new to the Plutora webinar fray, but he's the Senior Product Manager at Plutora. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks to you all for being here. It's always a good time to have you guys on the webinar.
Thanks, Charlene. And if you haven't heard Bob Davis before, you're in for a treat, and I'm really excited for the things that Ben is going to show today. It's just cool. So as a flow for today, we're going to talk a bit about the marketplace and why we need VSM. And with that is an exciting announcement that we made yesterday as Plutora and what it actually means. And then Ben's going to actually take us for a deep dive, and we're going to kind of geek out on metrics for a bit, and he'll take us all through that. And just a note too, Ben, you're in Sydney, Australia, so this is quite late or early in the morning, depending upon how you look at it, but I'm still really excited about it. Kicking this all off, Bob, you're going to kind of, a lot's changed in the world of DevOps and Agile, and then yet it hasn't. What's the market conditions that kind of has changed things and moving us forward?
Jeff, it's there's a lot that's changed. We've had a big year, as you know, and it's been a pretty exciting world in the place of DevOps and software development. But first, I just want to thank everybody. Before we get too far into it, I want to thank everybody for joining us and spending the time. We're really super excited about what we're doing today. We've come out with a bunch of new capabilities in the product that we think reflect exactly what you're talking about, Jeff, the trends in the market. We were talking, I'm going to remind you, Jeff, of a conversation we had yesterday with one of the analysts in our industry who commented that in a recent survey, the organizations they surveyed, enterprise, global 1000s, this sort of thing, they said that the speed of digital transformation in their world accelerated from where it was ahead by 3 to 5 years over the course of just a few months during the pandemic. Now imagine the chaos of trying to transform your development process, of trying to keep up with the latest technology, and at the same time living in a world that is requiring you to react to changing market conditions on literally an hourly basis. And it's tough. Transformation is hard. Okay. And the key to it, and what we've seen, the key to it is visibility. I mean, the bottom line is that everything about being efficient, about being able to collaborate with people, about knowing where I can add value to the process is about knowing where that place is about understanding what's going on. It's about having a view across the entire process, no matter what tool, no matter what group it is, no matter what time zone it is. I mean, we do development, and Ben here is in Australia. You're in Seattle. We have developers in England. This is a very difficult project. So in order for that to happen, to be able to provide the visibility, in order to take Agile and DevOps principles and actually make them effective, you've got to have that view. And we've seen that. We're going to talk about it. You're going to talk about it, Jeff. You're going to talk about some of the changes in our own usage of the product. But the bottom line is we've shifted 180 degrees from a predominantly user-driven usage of our product to now a data-driven. And that's the bottom line. If there's a theme here, and this slide captures it, DevOps is now about data. Mm-hmm. Automation is your grandfather's DevOps. Data is what it's all about, because that visibility, that's driven by data. And without the data, you don't have it. So we've seen that. We've seen that in our customers' usage of the product. We've seen that in the requirements for integrations. We've seen that in how the industry is reacting to the trends. If you look at all the predict stock, it's all about prediction. It's all about and that requires visibility, and that requires data. And it's really an amazing thing. I mean, I love this picture, and I love this quote, that yes, it takes effort to step back and pause and take a holistic view of what's going on, to be able to mine your development value streams and be able to grab that data so that you can see. It takes some effort. It takes some organizational evolution. It takes some process work. But Jeff, can you afford not to do it?
No, you can't. Given the millions that have been spent and the executive fatigue of, hey, I've got a new process, a new methodology, a new tool, a new team member, a new whatever, and yet still not being able to answer the single most important question from an investment point of view. Did it work? Are we doing better than we did before? Really? Can you prove it? That requires data.
And that visibility, that requirement to see, stems from no matter where you are in the equation. If you're on the planning side and you have visibility into the costs and the strategic themes and the budget allocations and the resources, that's awesome. But do you understand how that's actually coming out at the end? Have you really done it? Have you really improved? And if you're on that DevOps side, the right side, if you will, and you're making yourself as efficient and automated as possible, and you're releasing wonderfully, okay, step back. Did I release what we thought we were going to release? We don't know unless we connect that back to the beginning of the process. That's the visibility. And if I have to hunt for it, if I have to populate spreadsheets and run 75 reports and consolidate them every month and put them in a report and send them to management, you know what? It ain't going to happen. It ain't going to happen. People aren't that way. It needs to be automatic. The alerts need to be there. It needs to happen. And that mining of the data needs to sit on top so that I don't get in the way of the developers. The key here is reacting to the customer, to the market changes and the customer needs. And Lord knows, everybody on this webinar has lived through an amazing year and a half. And that transformation, acceleration, the technology, I mean, it's chaotic. Transformation is hard. You've got to have the data to get the visibility, to be able to build and deliver the value that the customers want, that the market needs. And if you don't, you will die. You will become uncompetitive, because the world is all about software. Competitive differentiation is all about software. So it is super exciting to see what we're going to do. And if we, and we're not going to spend a lot of time dissecting value stream management, but there's a great quote from Gartner that kind of sets it up and will provide some nice guardrails around what we're trying to achieve. And I think that there's some keys. This is really exciting stuff, to see the major industry analysts actually starting to define this and build this category. I mean, recognizing this need. And look at the key elements of the quote. First of all, it's system thinking. What does that mean? Holistic. I got to look at this as an entire system, not as a group of individual pieces. It's a system. It's all connected. improving the flow of value. That's at the heart of value stream management, by its very name. We need to control, the flow of value, all the way from the need to the market, to stay up with the market. That's key. And I have to have visibility into the progress to know if I'm doing it well. Because your boss or the CIO or the CEO or the board, depending on where you are, they're going to want to know, hey, I've spent several $1 million on these tools. Are we getting better? I better have visibility into the progress. And in order to continuously improve, which is at the bedrock of everything we do in this whole world of value stream management, I have to be able to highlight where the bottlenecks are, where the constraints are, where I'm waiting for stuff, and be able to really focus on that. What does that require? Jeff, what does that require? Data.
That's all about data, baby.
And that data gives you that visibility. And that visibility fuels your ability to compete and deliver value, which allows you to compete. So with that in mind, I think it's time. We should dive deeper, Jeff, into what's going on with VSM. And I think we're going to pause for a quick poll, I believe, but let's move quickly so we can get into what's coming out here in the summer of 2021 from Plutora, VSM, and the software delivery market.
All right, we do have our first poll that has just gone out. The question is, are you currently using a value stream management solution? And the polling question should be up on your screen now. You can choose from yes, have a VSM in place, in the process of implementing, no, but planning on implementing one, or no and no current plan to use one. So you can go ahead and make your choice. Do you guys want me to leave the poll open for a minute and let everybody make their choice, and then we'll circle back and take a look at the results?
You bet.
Okay,
that'd be great. Well, what is it that we're announcing? And thanks for that great background. There's 3 things that you'll take away from the announcement we made yesterday, and they're really interesting to you in how you're managing your software delivery and using value stream management in the process. The first is a transition of Plutora to being a data-centric platform, a big data solution. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why and what that means to you. We're going to talk about the expansion we have into using planning data and how much of the data from planning systems we're bringing in, and how does that help you as an organization. And the final bit that we're really going to also spend a fair bit of time on are this thing called value stream flow metrics, which, what is that? How does that, what does that do to you? Charlene, we can go ahead and close the poll now. I think everybody's got it. Interestingly enough, on the poll, when asked, if you have a value stream management solution in place, about 13% of you say that you do. 10% are, thinking about it, or are in the process of implementing, and the vast majority, almost 50%, 45% are saying no, but we're going to implement one. I'll tell you, that is what I hear all the time. Oh yeah, it's it is now the latest cool thing. It is the new trend that everybody's interested in, because value stream management has such broad implications, and at the heart of it is the data we've been talking about. So for those that have no current plans to use one, which is about 33%, pay attention to some of the things we're going to talk about, because at the heart of value stream management are some of the things that you're going to need in the future. So let's dive in. When we talk about the journey of improving software delivery at the highest level, it looks something like this. We describe this as the improvement kata using Scrum. And the essence is it's a 4-part methodology of moving down this journey. The first is know where you're going. How many times have I heard people just want a bunch of metrics, or they want to, improve their deployment frequency, or they improve their check-in rates, or what have you? It's like, that's not the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to have a vision of improving flow of value from idea to production. And then in that journey of solving it, in that process, to come up with a value stream map of what does it actually take. You'll be amazed. And we've got quite a number of webinars on this topic, and how to attack environments, release, just the overall process. How do you do value stream mapping? Look on our webinars. We've got a lot there. In that step of creating a current state value stream map, you're going to come up with a plan, because you'll have all these discoveries and Kaizen moments of goodness, we should fix these things, in which you'll create a plan like, well, why don't we fix the organization here? Why don't we change how things move around? And in that plan, you're going to need data that you'll use as part of that journey to say, well, this is how long it's taking before. Our plan is to improve it by this, and then execute that plan, and then look at the data to see how you did. It's pretty straightforward. When you have the resultant data, you have the proof of, did you do better? So that really leads us into saying, well, why do we do that, once every year? Or why are we doing that once every team and then not for, years afterwards? Because that's what the general standard is. The point is we can. What we started at Plutora as a workflow solution, we now have transitioned to having our customers continue this improvement kata using our platform everywhere. So much so that now 85% of the transactions inside of our platform are coming from data and APIs outside of our platform, and using Plutora to correlate the data together and overlay on top of the different workflows and practices and activities that we manage. And we track and manage data from the entirety of the cycle. So from insights, planning, all the way through to into the delivery, into production, and tracking incidences back, and connecting what's being planned to the change records that are in the service management side. Using this data gives you the ability to correlate really fascinating things like, gosh, this particular methodology, whatever it is producing less incidences than this other methodology. Or this team over here that has a higher level of automation has this impact in terms of how environments are being used, their cycle time of getting into production, their ability to produce high quality software, and with the right amount of cost from the team perspective. All these kinds of questions can be answered using that data. As Plutora, we're doing a whole bunch under the covers to change our architecture and change what's happening and make things better. But the essence is that we pull data in from any methodology and bring it all together. The second key point of our announcement gets into our expansion into planning data. And so one of the things we've done here is, instead of just bringing in planning data that's associated to releases, we now bring in all planning data. And we bring it in from any tool and any methodology. We act as a standardization across all the different kinds of toolings there. Now, it's not just the toolings, because every team, every project really has a different set of priorities and statuses and so forth. And if you're going to look across this and get some trends that are spanning teams, you need a way to talk about those and to normalize that data. That's what we do. We have a common data model that we wrap everything into. We've always had that. The difference being now is that we're bringing in all this data in a hierarchical fashion. And as we bring it in, we're then able to correlate it. That data gets transformed into a data warehouse. We also bring in another key aspect: time series, change history. We can tell you how long a particular user story has sat with a particular person for how long, or what phases was it in for how long. And all that's needed so that we can then do some interesting calculations and so forth with it. Now, we give you a couple of different aspects of being able to work with that data, where you can, in essence, use our out-of-box dashboards that we've got, which we have a whole ton of them, or you can use our embedded enterprise analytics engine, where you can create your own reporting, go party, if you will, across all this data. So really, this then takes us to, all of this enables us to then give you the next step, which is where it gets kind of interesting. And so the story behind this is a really interesting question that gets asked to every single team across everywhere. How's it going? And it's generally about like that, right? It's how's software going? How's it going in our enterprise? How's it going for team X? How's it going for product, whatever that product team is? The part that's interesting is, depending upon who you ask, you'll get different kinds of answers. If you ask the dev leaders, you get answers along the lines of, well, man, we're doing great. where our defects escaping to production are this rate. We got our deployment frequency up. We got this many story points through. We're rocking. To which the business leaders say, I don't know what the crap you're talking about. I'm trying to answer questions of, is our revenue going up? Are costs going down? Are we doing better at adoption? Are we expanding? Usage improving? What's our customer satisfaction? In essence, dev leaders think about outputs and processes. Meanwhile, business thinks about speed and outcomes. There's an impedance mismatch. There's a communication barrier there because they're not thinking in the same terms. Meanwhile, there's always an executive overlay of looking at an overall way of saying, how are we doing from an efficiency standpoint? Can we reduce waste? A standard CIO practice is that there's a 5%, 10% cut across every team so we can reallocate that money and focus in other places with the intent that, individual teams will figure out how to improve their efficiency. Well, how do we actually operationalize that? What is it that we can do to make that move forward? Now, hey, one area that's been already touted that Plutora already does are these great DORA or DevOps metrics, where they're broken down into stability and release metrics, which are awesome. They're great indicators of, if I look at stability in terms of my change failure rate or MTTR, looking at how often we fail as we, as soon as the code gets checked in and gets, pushed off into production, how well do we do stability-wise for that? Or how quickly does that actually happen of getting hot off the presses and into production, and how frequently? Those are great metrics and they're a great start, but still they can be gamed. Still, they don't really tell you that, well, I checked in 3 comments and, I got that through into production. Have I really changed the game by doing that? In essence, it could almost be analogous to measuring keystrokes developers press. Yeah, they're an indicator that the more keystrokes developers press is an indicator that more work's going on, but is it really helpful to help us understand? The key difference is that we have to start learning from Lean and pull some of the same methodologies and practices that we got when we think about lean manufacturing. This set of problems has been studied for a long time and a lot of effort's been into it. So why don't we relearn what the other industries in manufacturing have already learned and bring it forward? There's a couple of concepts here of lead time and cycle time that are fundamental, and they can be applied to almost any process. Lead time being the amount of calendar time when a work item was accepted to when it was actually delivered, and cycle time being the amount of time that it took to actually work on it, recognizing that there's times we're working on it, times that we're not. If we know those two things and can do some calculations on it, we can start to figure out things like efficiency. We want to be as close to 100% efficient as we can, but that's not possible. It's not realistic. There's things like life, sleeping, weekends and so forth that also happen that you'll never get there, but at least you can use it as a measurement to improve. There's some other aspects of lean that really help us here. Work in progress, long studied principle. And one of the agile foundational principles is limit your WIP. Why? Well proven, well studied that the more things you're doing at the same time, the more juggling, you lose time in cost and context switching. And that time gets significant as the number of items goes up. Well, gosh, wouldn't it be cool if we were able to measure the lead time and cycle time and change the discussion so that we're measuring that in terms of flow of value from idea all the way to getting into customers' hands? That's foundational. And that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. Let's pull these in and start looking at them from a set of metrics. Now, there's some other interesting aspects. Being able to evaluate the kind of work that goes into every team, because some of the work is functional. In fact, most of the work often is functional. I'm fixing bugs. I'm creating features. I created this new widget. But a fair chunk of the work that goes on is non-functional. Things that are risk reduction in nature, automation, adding more testing, automated unit tests and automated performance tests and other kinds of checks and things that go into the system. Or there might be non-functional items that are architectural in nature. I'm going to re-architect portions of the system. And this is generally every time we deliver software, by definition, we're introducing more technical debt into the system. That debt has to continually get paid. Otherwise, we'll pay for it in the end with a lack of quality or really incidences in production. We need to remember that the people that generally do that work, that do the work of risk reduction and re-architecture and paying off technical debt, almost always are the same people creating features and defects, and it reduces their efficiency. So if we're only looking at functional work, we're missing half the picture. So as is now really being pushed in the industry is to keep track of all work. Think of them as just additional user stories that are tagged as, well, these are non-functional and they're risk related, or they're tagged as non-functional and they're debt related, alongside of the features and defects together. And the picture of all this together gives us something really interesting. So with that, we're introducing the value stream flow metrics as a set of metrics that you can utilize to basically have a common language across any team of how are things going from an efficiency point of view, and use these metrics to guide your efforts of improvement in this standard kind of improvement kata. Now, we're going to have a poll here again, and then we're going to actually watch a demo of some of these things so you can see how they can work in your environment.
Okay, so the poll is out. The question is, what metrics do you use to track progress in software delivery? I believe this is a multiple choice poll. Am I right, Jeffrey?
It is a multiple choice.
Okay, great. So you can go ahead and choose from multiple throughput, lead time or cycle time, story points, revenue, cost, work in progress, WIP, or functional and non-functional work items. Go ahead and make your multiple choices. I'll leave the poll open again for a few minutes and let the audience make their choices. You guys can continue on and just give me the cue and I'll close it up for you.
You bet. Well, I think we're going to switch over to Ben showing a demo because that's what makes this cool.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll just get that up and running in a few seconds. Yeah, as you said, Jeff, there's some key metrics that we talked about with value stream, throughput, cycle time, lead time, work in progress. We'll go through all of those and how Plutora visualize those and gives that information to you to make decisions. I just want to check, Jeff, can you see my screen?
Yep, looks great.
Fantastic.
It looks pretty.
Lots of colors. So what we'll do is we'll walk through each one of these charts, the information it shows, and also a bit of a correlation that you get between them. One of the very big thing about value stream flow metrics is they're all quite related. And it comes down to what we call as Little's law, or queuing theory, is that your throughput, your work in progress, and your cycle and lead time all have a relationship with each other and really affect each other. So at the top here, we've got our throughput chart. And this is throughput, not just code completed or a release. This is all the way from when you've started to work on a piece of work, from its inception, all the way to the hands of the customer. And you can see there's different trends that you can see over time. We were doing okay in January, February, March, we had some issues. May, we had some issues, but we did well in April and June. And it's about the ability of you to have that visibility of why you did well at sometimes at certain points and why others. So if we move our way down, and I'll bring your attention to the blue line, the features that we're delivering over time, we start to see the lead time and the cycle time. And we're seeing quite spiking areas around March and May, which happen to be when we were delivering the least amount. Because as lead and cycle time increase, so does your throughput decrease. And that's part of queuing theory. It's very well known. As you said, Jeff, a lot of people spend a lot of time studying queuing theory and why that sort of happens, but pretty much being is the more you take on, the more things end up in a queuing state, and high queuing states have a disproportionate economic effect on the work you do, or the easy way to say, the more stuff you do, the more stuff ends up waiting to be worked on. And a nice way to think of it is if you're going to get a cup of coffee and you turn up and you're the first person in line, the all cycle time, lead time is how long it takes to create that cup of coffee. But if you turn up and there's 5 people in front of you, you wait for the cycle time and lead time of all those people ahead of you. So now a 2-minute coffee can take you 10 to 15 minutes. And that's not because they're any less efficient, because the machine's down or anything like that. It's just purely that it was waiting for that work to happen. So as we said before, you've got some issues with your throughput on your March and May for your features. As you drill down, you can start to have a look, well, what happened? What was happening in that time? What was the actual individual lead time that we had for different stories and features and tech debt that we had? And you can see there's quite a nice clustering that you have here, but there's also some outliers. There are, of course, some issues here that are going quite up. You can have a look at each one, have a look at what one it was, how many days it was, but something's happened. And what's happened here in March is we've had quite a long lead time on these particular stories, and we've held up the release train. We said, okay, cool, let's wait, let these stories come in. But what you found is you've actually caused all this extra value that you've created, all this work in progress, all this completed features to wait. And that's value that you didn't give to the customer. And you worked out, and then you start to see, we start looking at the areas of work in progress. One of the other key metrics is you've got your throughput and your cycle time and your lead time, but you also have your WIP. And that sort of thing affects you. And I think it's a good idea to think of things as exactly as they are, as flow. So we can say, oh, okay, that's fine. When we were in March, we had a bit of, oh, sorry, screen's getting a bit off. On March, we had one bad story. That's fine. We won't have that problem again. We released it in April. The problems are all gone. But why did it go down in May? And that's why you can say, well, that had nothing to do with March. We delivered that story, went out in April. Why would we slow down? But you got to remember, flow of work means that if you have a bump in work, if things get stuck in, let's say, March, we couldn't get everything out, but then we got it out. But we said, oh, we didn't deliver everything we wanted in March, so let's just start more things. Let's get more things started and going. And so we can catch up. But work in progress, once again, it starts to blow out, it slows you down, and you start getting, in a classic CFD fashion down here, is you start getting bumps in here. So you start to see that this one issue here in your flow has, in the end, caused a massive difference between what you've started working on and what you're completing. And that's about flow. Just because you've got a block in your drain, you don't turn on the tap faster. That all it does is it floods your bathroom. So when you start to understand flow, you start under these lean metrics, you understand how lead time, cycle time, you have that visibility, you can start making decisions that make sense at a whole holistic value stream level, not just as an individual thing of a team or an efficiency per team or per person. That understands as well. And I wanted to bring you to two more graphs that were here, some attention to those as well. Flow efficiency. So what we do is when we bring in that planning data, we bring in all the states that you're in, but we also bring in whether it's a wait state or an active state. Classic one might be in dev is an active state, whereas in QA ready, maybe a waiting state. And again, this will really show up that queuing and that waiting area you have. So some might be done quite quickly. You might say, well, every time I check in on our devs, we've got lots of automated testing, a lot of automated unit testing. They seem very fast. QA is using a lot of automated testing. They all seem individually quite fast. But what you find is if there's ever a mismatch between your two states, if things are delivered to the QA, not in the same cycle or batch sizes they take, you start getting, once again, queuing between each one of those areas. Or you might hold a lot of things for a release train, which looks good for predictability, but you also hold a lot of value in your stream that you're not passing all the way through. And what will happen is you'll get those things will end up with high amount of times in each one of those waiting states. So it might be 10 days to finish something, but it might spend 7 days in a QA ready state. So then your flow efficiency is only 30%. There's 70% you've left on the table that has nothing to do with how fast people work or cracking the whip or doing overtime. It's purely by not managing the flow through your system. And the last one I want to bring you to is work breakdown. So as you've probably seen a few of these charts, we like to break down things, and as you said before, Jeff, into debt-related work, risk-related work, feature-related work, because we want to bring the light onto all those areas. If you don't measure everything that goes through, you have artificial cycle time and lead times. Things seem to take longer, but you can't work out why. It's because you're not measuring all the work that people are doing. So there is waiting that happens because the work's just not getting captured. And it's also quite a good predictor for the future. If you start delivering a lot of features, then often you generate debt by trying to go faster, by trying to push things through. You're going to have to pay that time later on, whether it be risk changes or it be tech debt or it be or defects. And here you can see in March we delivered a lot of features, But before those features, by delivering them so quickly, we had to pay for a lot of tech debt. And that can say, sometimes people say, oh, we deleted a lot of features, but then it took us 2 months to do the next lot. It's because there's a lot of debt and probably risk work that had to go in once that was delivered to support that work going forward. So that's just a few of the metrics and a few of the dashboards. I mean, that's what I would go for, Jeff. Thank you.
Love it, love it, love it. So in our poll, the question was, what metrics do you use to track progress in software delivery? It's pretty well split. A lot of people are looking at lead time, cycle time, about 20%. A lot of people are looking at story points and the number of story points going through the system. Much less is, throughput is another one that is similar to story points. And it's interesting. Only 10% are looking at cost, 15% are looking at the work in progress, and 12% are looking at functional and non-functional items. So not very many looking at the non-functional as tracking progress. Ben, I have one question that I thought would be really fun to dive into, which is, you've presented this to quite a number of people and customers and other people that have been sort of baiting through this. What common questions do you get when you, what's the most common thing you get when you start presenting this and you're like, and here this is, what's some of the first things people say?
Actually, one of the big ones that people ask is, what's the difference between a lead time and a cycle time? And I think you touched on it a little bit before, Jeff. Differs for different people. Here at Plutora, we take it all the way from the conceptual area. So we will put things like the speccing out, the UX, the experimentation that we do at the start of taking on a feature as our lead time. And we take our cycle time from when development starts. So we'll have an in-dev phase or a status that we put it to. And what that does give you is that gives you that fuzzy front end, as they often call it in DevOps, of understanding, well, how long does it take to actually get that concept and to start the work? And then how long, once we started the work, how long does it take for that to get to production? And they're both very interesting things, and they differ quite a lot. You might say cycle time is always good to crush down and get smaller because you want to get that code through to production. But also, if you look at the lead time, there could be some value in that taking a little bit longer. But you got to make sure that that time that you're spending is spending time on actually adding value and not in any sort of queuing or waiting state.
Cool. There's a question here. I think they're referring to the chart, so I'll translate it a bit. It says, what is the completed work items distribution? I think they're looking for a deeper description of what is that.
Yep, sure. So what we do is we take each one of those individual stories that we've done the averaging on, and we put that up into a swarm chart. So this is all the individual lead time for all the stories that make up the delivery that you've done in that period. And what you're looking on for this one is you're looking for a distribution. So the more you get in a clustering in a particular way, it shows that your delivering is more predictable, that things are taking about the same amount of time as you do them. Anything that shows a large moving out to outliers here is that when you're saying, okay, so there's things that we're delivering that is taking a lot longer than our average or our 85 percentile. So you're really looking for both a distribution and also outliers. And that's your lead time for all the different stories, for tech debt, all the risk, all the things that were delivered in that period.
Cool. There's a question of, where does this data come from?
Yep. So we pull in the data from your planning tools, whether it be your Jiras, your Rallies, your version 1. So we bring in all this information from there. We mix that with obviously your release information that we also pull in from Plutora, and what we do from all those is as you mentioned before, time series. So we take in state changes. We look at the history APIs. We pull that in, and we understand which modes that they're in, which status we do. We map them up to the common ones. So you might have several different types of execution status. So there might be in dev or ready for dev or QA ready or in testing, and we use that into our common data model into what we call an execution mode.
Excellent. It's just short. It says Little's Law with a question mark behind it. I'll translate. What is
Sure. So in queuing theory, there's Little's Law, which says that you can take pretty much your lead time or your cycle time and your WIP and you multiply them together to get your throughput. But because they're all mathematically related to each other. You can also take it the other way. You can say, well, I can work out from my throughput, my cycle time and my wait time. So it's pretty much just a mathematical function that's used in queuing theory that has there's a relationship between all those three different metrics. And because it's a mathematical relationship, it's often referred to as a law.
There's another one, queuing theory with a question mark behind it.
So lean in that borrows from queuing theory. So it's a mathematical study of queues, and you think that wouldn't take a lot of studying, but probably about 50 to 100 years of different types of studying on queuing. But the idea being is there's certain mathematical functions you can put against of anything that's a queue, which means that anything that accepts work gets worked on and it goes out the other side. There's a whole section of applied mathematics that goes around saying, all right, what do I accept and how long it takes and what it does and how can I predict that? And in essence, that is what software delivery is. The features come in, they're accepted by the team, they take time to do it, and they come out the other side. And they use exactly the same principles that everything else does. You accept too much in at the same time, that blows out your whip, and then you affect that cycle time. So it's very, very important for any team to understand how and when they accept work, because it has a very big effect on both your throughput and measuring your whip as well.
Love it. And one more from me, Ben, just because, aren't people kind of worried, like if I do this across all my teams, somebody might see my data and see how bad I am, and oh my gosh, I can't show this to my boss. Do you hear that question?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and that's why we look at value streams rather than an individual teams or a particular department in there. We look at the different value streams. Even in Plutora, we look at different parts of products that we have, and we should make sure that we measure and we understand what that value stream is, because value streams are going to differ between each ones. You might be the mobile app part of an insurance company where you can work faster, you don't have the same compliance, where someone might be or the same legacy debt, or you might be the core systems that are stuck with an old mainframe system, you have very high compliance. So we don't look at probably the individuals within a value stream and how they're measured, but actually how the stream it does. And also, I think a lot of it is the concept to understand that with a lot of queuing theory and a lot of queue and a lot of lean, it's not the amount of time that people take to do the work that slows you down. It's the time that things stay in a waiting state. So you often can say there's no point making people go 10% faster when it sits there for 3 days. It's the queuing and understanding the flow is where you get the efficiency from, not from making people work harder. So I would say that's one thing to always to remember with value stream flow metrics.
Love it. So I will move on with, we've got a few more slides to hop through. And if you have any other questions, by all means, put them into the Q&A channel. So the whole point of all this is, when you're looking at managing your various value streams in the enterprise, there's in essence 4 major problems you have to address. And the first one is that you can't really see what's happening from an individual pipeline from beginning to end. And that challenge means you have a really hard time understanding the flow, the delivery, the cycle time, the lead time, where the bottlenecks are. You need something to help ferret that out. Well, if you can't see what's happening at a single pipeline point of view, you certainly can't see across the portfolio. You can't see where the dependencies are. You can't see where one team blocks another. What also makes that hard, in any enterprise, we're all at varying states of transformation. Some that are a little more waterfall, some that are a little more agile, and everywhere in between. No matter where you are in that journey, there's different methodologies, different toolings, different styles and cultures that are team specific. But yet we need some way to manage across those and to normalize the different methodologies and tools and optimize it between them. Now, if you can find a way to use Value Stream Manager to do that, then you'll also have a way to manage and provide a method of continuous improvement and guide that for every team, not guide it from a top-down perspective, but to enable a bottom-up team-specific way of setting their own goals and proving that they're making improvements cycle after cycle. So this is where Plutora comes in. And we're a value stream management platform. We sit in the cloud. We ingest data from across the entire tool chain, whatever tool you've got, from planning, your build, your code quality, your testing, all your various styles of testing, your packaging, your infrastructure, your deployments, and all that into operations and your service management. And all of that data comes into Plutora, gets correlated together so that we can normalize what's happening there. The statuses are made standard. There's modes that get put on top of that, so you can still see the original thing. In essence, we converge the tool chain so that data flowing from one system can poke and prod and update statuses in others. Super common in our world, for example, that all the user stories and changes get correlated to a release that then get pushed into a tool like ServiceNow as a set of changes, so you can see end-to-end what's happening. Now, we have a layer of management orchestration on top of that, so that you can manage your pipelines, you can manage your releases, you can manage your environments. It doesn't matter how far along the journey of DevOps you are or how much you've been automated. We'll sit as a top layer to glue all that together, if you will. If you need us to do some orchestration, we do that. If you don't, that's okay. We can poke whatever system you've got there. But the key is we bridge the gap between manual and automated tasks. One common scenario that our customers use is a cutover solution for those go live, weekends, if you will. We can start with a completely workflow-based solution where your puppeteering will send emails out to people, or they can log into Plutora and check and say, okay, it's time for you to back up the database and time for you to bring this down and switch, infrastructure over. Or if it's all automated, we just kick it and move it to the next step of the process. We then bring all that data in so you can say, well, what steps are taking the longest? And then you can automate that. Or you can look at ways of revamping the process and then changing that deployment plan to match. Now, all of this data is rolled into our decision-making analytics layer. That enables you to have out-of-box dashboards, visualizations that are distributed throughout the entire product. In addition to that, you have an enterprise-class analytics engine that you can create your own, whatever you want. Because really, at the end of the day, what happens is you'll see cycles and patterns. You'll see that you have inefficiencies. You'll look at the workflow. You'll find the bottlenecks. And then you got to follow your nose to sift through the data to find out what that particular problem is. To learn, for example, that a particular style of development where I've got defined release trains, and when I set those up and I'm supposed to have locked releases at a particular state, and yet I have certain teams that keep having late breaking user stories that it didn't define well enough, and they come in late, and then, oh, lo and behold, those teams are creating incidences at a much higher rate, order of magnitude higher rate than other teams. And now I have the data to go back to those teams and say, hey, look, if you're late with user stories, don't bring them into this release train, just jump on the next one. That's where the power of the data comes in to help you out. Now, as part of this, I would highly recommend to get the ebook that just dropped on these value stream flow metrics that Ben went through, and about how you can use these today in your world, and and use them to improve software delivery for every team. Using Plutora, you can get everything you need to really manage software delivery. This is the promise of value stream management. Eliminate the manual errors, automate areas that are needed. Use data as insight to improve the efficiency and collaboration. Bring the teams together in a way that is automated and automatic, so that people, like Bob was talking about, don't need to go create spreadsheets. If you're tired of reporting up, then stop. Just hook up systems that do it for you. Here's your metrics, and off you go. So with that, we'll jump to the questions. There's some questions.
Jeff, I have a question for you.
Yep.
You've this has been great, and I love the demo. Those metrics really pop. It's awesome to see, and again, we're really excited about it. One thing though, you've talked to, both of you guys have talked to a lot of customers, and these features and capabilities of our platform have actually been in use in sets of our customer base, to make sure they're working exactly as we expect and providing the value we do expect. Any kind of top level benefits that those customers that have used this, what are they seeing? What kind of improvements are they seeing? Any kind of ex post facto review of how we've done with these features in a real live environment?
Yes, absolutely. One of our customers is a healthcare customer, talked about throughput, meaning the number of user stories that they can push through their development factory. And when asked, hey, what has been the improvement of this improvement kata of using data to improve the efficiency? Mind you, they're not all DevOpsified. They're not completely microservices driven and release on demand. They're still running a sprint cadence. They're still running a change advisory board for a percentage of the releases they go through. They have a yearly release calendar. They have a hardening phase. So a lot of the DevOps practices that you would put as purist DevOps practices, they're on the journey and they're doing really well, but yet they're not all the way there. So what results have they seen? His answer was they've seen a 33%, basically a 1/3 improvement in their overall throughput of user stories. Now, one way could be to do that is to go to your planning guys and say, and your development team and say, hey, just reduce the size of your user stories and create more of them. Great. That's not what they did. All they did was to say, everybody keep doing the same thing you're doing, but we're going to look at the flow of value and make improvements to stop some of the problems that we have that are slowing us down. And by using these practices, we're able to improve the throughput of user stories through the system by 30%. Now, 30% may not seem like a large number, but imagine it a different way. Imagine saying, hey, we've got a dev team of this many people. Imagine adding 30% more people writing code and delivering software than you did before. And what's the impact to your business of having that improved capacity? It's massive. What's the value to the business of doing that?
Very significant. Very.
So great question, Bob. Thank you. Hey, there's a question here, Ben, that I'll throw your way. It's a silly question, but where do I use Jira and where do I use Plutora? Where does one stop and the other begin?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know Jira is definitely your day-to-day tool. That people work best when they pick the tools that they want to work with. We're not forcing people to use day-to-day for Plutora. Plutora is to suck that information in and to give you the analytics on top of Jira. So it's the Jira for day-to-day, do your work. What we'll do is we'll suck that information into Plutora and we'll give you the insights at a higher level that you can then use back to those teams to use within Jira. But Jira is definitely a day-to-day tool where we're, as you've mentioned before, a data platform.
Awesome. There's another question here about, hey, there's some add-ons that I can get to Jira that will do this for an individual team. What do I get out of Plutora that, I can't get from those add-ons?
Yeah, well, that's a good question as well. I mean, there is definitely add-ons into these tools looking for different teams. We're looking at an aggregation across different teams, across different tool sets. We also give the ability to manage the release and the builds and the other areas as well. So once you understand where you have problems with your value stream from your planning information, we give you the ability to then correlate that information to how a build's working between your environments, how your environment's utilization, how is your release. So it's the ability not just to suck that information in for an individual team, but it's across an organization, across different tools. Like as you said before, someone could be on Snow or version 1, different tool sets within the organization, doesn't matter. And then once you do have that information, we give you areas such as release management, environment management, build visibility that allows you to then act upon the things that you find for your value stream, reviewing and analyzing your value stream, the value that it adds.
Beautiful. This is actually this is probably, I'm going to ask this at 2 different levels. And so I'll throw this to you, Bob, and then to Ben, because it's 2 different perspectives that are valuable. What recommendations do you have to handle pushback from Agile team members for having these metrics in place? Bob, you want to take that from an executive point of view? If I'm, hey, if I'm talking to an executive, what would be the answer to that?
I think executive in a scenario like this, an executive bought into the overall process is your best friend. The notion of removing the barriers with the executive mindset to understand the value of investing in the tools that will make you successful in every step of the way, to be able to measure the overall benefit of value stream management and Agile and DevOps, on the delivery to the business. How are we doing? Getting better. Understanding that from an executive point of view is a $1 billion question. And the downside of that is incredibly minor, because the notion, I think one of the things we found in the pandemic is people are trusting their employees. Mm-hmm. They're working from home. They're trusting their employees. The entire hybrid workforce and where we go in the future is fundamentally based on the notion that we've discovered that we can trust employees, and we no longer have our day-to-day work scenarios being driven by union shops that set up work processes in the 1800s. So we're trusting our employees. Those employees, those Agile folks on the planning edge, can now be confident that people understand just what it takes, the planning and everything, and do it quickly. And if you can get your releases out and get your features out to the customers and show you're getting value, I can't imagine a developer Agile on the DevOps train, on the Agile side, being unhappy with a light shining on the fact that they're generating incredible value to the organization. Believe in yourself. It isn't about a punitive scenario. It's about making the engine, the systems thinking. Remember what value stream management is: the system operating quickly, right? That's what it's about. And an executive that has that visibility, a boardroom that believes in the development processes that you are setting up in your organization, that is everything you need to have everybody out of your way and move. I've often said the real value of value stream management is it doesn't get in the way of the developer. We don't make you change your tool. We don't make you change the way you work. Rather, we provide access to the data that allows you to understand the influence and impact of your work. Think of it that way. I think it's that's how I think of it, and that's certainly the view that I would take.
And to add on that, to anybody that finds himself in that situation, please give us a call. We'll help you with that pitch of why it's better for the organization from a team happiness point of view, as well as from an overall efficiency point of view, to have that mindset. But there's a lot there, and we've got a lot of customers that have proven it.
Yep.
Ben, you want to take, we just have a quick minute, and then we've got to turn it back to Charlene. Do you want to take a swing at that, what you say to Agile teams that might push back on these metrics?
Yeah, sure. My quickest one would be that as Bob said, it's a value stream. So we're not looking for local optimization. So actually trying to tell people in the previous way that, making you more efficient, you're the testing team, test faster and all that sort of thing, just encourages larger batches sizes that actually makes your value stream worse. So in fact, if it's anything, it's better to measure the value stream than individuals. And therefore these metrics actually don't crush the individual like individual efficiency metrics. It actually empowers them to get the work through faster and focus less on them and more about delivering value to the customer.
Fantastic. Charlene, we'll go to you. Just a reminder, there's power in integrating all this together where you can correlate this data of efficiency, not only with, what's happening in the pipeline, but bring it together with quality metrics, with incidences in production, with overall investments and costs, with expected value realization, with things that are related in the pipeline, and start to have better insights in how you're doing in your transformation journey. So, Charlene.
All right, you left me with a minute. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. I do want to thank everybody who did submit questions. There were some really good ones in there. So thanks very much to all the attendees who did. Just a quick reminder to everybody that today's event has been recorded. So if you missed any or all of it, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Yeah, we will be sending out an email after today's webinar that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the DevOps.com website, so you can go find it there. Just go to DevOps.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. Real quick, before we close things out, I want to do the $425 Amazon gift card winners. Today's winners are Diego C., Zandra R., David S., and Lucia N. We'll be following up with all 4 of you guys. Congratulations. We will get to you via email your $25 Amazon gift card, so please check your inbox. And if you don't see anything there, please check your spam folder. Jeffrey, Bob, and Ben, thank you guys for such a great presentation. As always, good stuff all the way around, and congratulations on this new technology. It's really exciting for you. I'm excited to see it in action. So thanks so much for doing the webinar today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charlene.
All right, guys. Also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.